Welcome to the Spitzen-Körper Thelema. Helena Blavatsky published The Key to Theosophy in 1889 in the full flush of the Theosophical Society's public mission, to recover and synthesize what she called the wisdom religion, the perennial esoteric doctrine she believed unified all authentic spiritual traditions. This excerpt comes from the book's foundational dialogues, where Blavatsky defends her lineage claim by reaching back to Ammonius Saccas and the Neoplatonic school of Alexandria, then backward still to Pythagoras, the Egyptian mysteries, and the secret teachings embedded in every major religion. What matters here is not whether her historical claims hold, they don't, strictly, but that Blavatsky was constructing a genealogy of esotericism itself. She was establishing the intellectual permission structure for late 19th century Western seekers to treat Hindu, Buddhist, Hermetic, Platonic, and Christian sources as fragments of a single shattered doctrine. This passage anchors what we now call the perennial philosophy, though the term would not be formalized until Aldous Huxley's 1945 work. Blavatsky's real innovation was to make esotericism methodologically respectable, to argue that secrecy had not corrupted tradition but preserved it. The Theosophical Society itself emerged in 1875 from the wreckage of spiritualism. Where the spiritualists claimed direct contact with the dead through mediums, Blavatsky positioned herself as the vessel for teachings transmitted by living ascended masters, hidden adepts scattered across India and Central Asia who guarded the true doctrine. This was her answer to the Protestant problem: if authority came not from papal succession or scriptural literalism but from initiatic lineage and direct transmission, then the West could finally access wisdom without submitting to ecclesiastical gatekeepers. She was a radical democrat of the esoteric. The Theosophical Society had no membership fees that mattered, no secret oaths, officially, and published everything. Yet she simultaneously insisted that understanding required preparation, that the exoteric shell had to be penetrated by serious study and moral discipline. This is the tension you are about to hear her resolve. Her sources here are real but selectively read. Mosheim's History of Ammonius, the references to Origen and Plotinus, the Greek texts, all genuine. But Blavatsky was mining them for permission to believe what she wanted to believe. She was doing what every esotericist does, she was making history serve metaphysics. What makes this passage essential is not its accuracy but its rhetorical power. She answers the obvious objection: how could secret teachings survive if no one wrote them down? By citing Buddha, Pythagoras, Jesus, Socrates, and Confucius, none of whom left writings, yet all of whom were preserved through disciples. She then pivots to the structure of ancient mystery cults, the Eleusinian mysteries, the Egyptian temples, the Jewish Merkava, Northern Buddhism's Mahayana versus Hinayana distinction. Every tradition, she claims, had two tiers. The masses received husks, the initiates received the grain. The passage itself is structured as a catechism, question and answer, which was her preferred form in The Key. It allowed her to anticipate objections while maintaining authorial control. Notice how she moves from historical proof to phenomenological description, the how of esoteric knowledge. Real theosophy, she says, is not attainable through study alone. Webster's dictionary definition, intercourse with God by physical or chemical processes, is dismissed as absurd. Instead, she reaches for Plotinus's concept of ecstasy, the liberation of finite consciousness into the infinite. She anchors this in the Sanskrit term samadhi, which the yogis practiced through fasting and meditation. Then she quotes Plato on meditation as the ardent turning of the soul toward God, not petition but silent receptivity. She even invokes what Dr. Wilder calls spiritual photography, the soul as a camera that captures past, present, and future simultaneously, because beyond the temporal world all is one day or state. This is where Blavatsky's genius shows. She is not describing mysticism as irrational emotion or occult parlor tricks. She is presenting it as a higher epistemology, a mode of knowing that transcends the limitations of the finite senses. The sage, she argues, invoking Apollonius of Tyana, sees what is about to take place. Common men see only the present. The gods alone see the future. The sage occupies a median position. It is a claim about the structure of consciousness itself, borrowed directly from Neoplatonism but repackaged for an audience terrified of both scientific materialism and ecclesiastical superstition. She then addresses the obvious question: if theosophy is ancient wisdom, why is it unknown in the West? Her answer layers three reasons. First, spiritual decline, a loss of real insight among Western nations, which have been enslaved to the dead letter of dogma and ritualism. This echoes the Protestant critique of Catholic corruption, but extended to all institutional religion. Second, and more forcefully, intentional secrecy. Real theosophy has always been kept hidden. And third, the reasons for that secrecy: human perversity and selfishness. Knowledge that could perfect the soul in the hands of the corrupt becomes weaponized. This is the doctrine that would justify the existence of secret organizations and hidden teachers, a justification that both protects esoteric authority from scrutiny and exempts it from democratic accountability. You cannot criticize what you are not allowed to see. The final section addresses her most persistent problem: the accusation that theosophists are just Buddhists in disguise, or worse, that they worship Buddha instead of Christ or God. Her defense is etymological. Buddhism, with two Ds, refers to Gautama's religious system. Buddhism, with one D, from Bodha, wisdom, refers to the perennial wisdom religion. The Theosophical Society includes Hindus, Brahmins, Christians, and Buddhists, she argues, because theosophy transcends all sectarian boundaries. Yet she also insists that the ethics of Buddhism and theosophy are identical because these ethics constitute the soul of the wisdom religion itself. She is having it both ways. Theosophy is both universal and specifically rooted in Asian esotericism. It encompasses all traditions yet claims special authority over Buddhist and Hindu sources. What you are hearing is the architect's blueprint for 20th century occultism. The Theosophical Society's real intellectual legacy was not that it proved the existence of ascended masters, it didn't, but that it established the methodology of comparative esotericism. It taught Western seekers to read across traditions, to see Hindu Vedanta as commentary on Platonic emanation, to recognize Kabbalah as a cipher for the same truths encoded in the Emerald Tablet. Blavatsky gave permission. She made it rational to believe in hidden wisdom precisely by arguing that secrecy was not a bug but a feature of authentic spirituality. Every tradition protected its core teaching. Therefore, if you were serious about truth, you had to become an initiate yourself. You had to study, meditate, purify yourself morally. You had to deserve what was hidden. This rhetorical move was totalizing. It meant that any evidence against theosophy's claims could be reinterpreted as evidence of their truth. If you could not find proof of ascended masters, it was because you were not sufficiently developed. If the ancient sources seemed to contradict her synthesis, it was because you were reading them exoterically, at the letter rather than the spirit. The system became unfalsifiable. But it also became extraordinarily attractive. For a generation of educated, spiritually hungry Westerners, particularly women, since Blavatsky herself was female and held institutional power, theosophy offered a third way. Not the materialism of Victorian science, not the literalism of institutional Christianity, but a profound, ancient, universal wisdom that could be known through disciplined practice and study. She was offering initiation to anyone willing to read, think, and transform themselves. That offer would shape esotericism for the next 130 years. Next, Arthur Edward Waite, The Hidden Church of the Holy Grail. The Spitzen-Körper Thelema. If this archive serves you, support it on Patreon. Link in the description.